Society assumes that when an older man stops chasing women, it is because he has lost his edge, his energy, or his confidence. But the truth is entirely different. He hasn't lost his edge. He has simply opened his eyes. We live in a culture that glorifies the chase. From a very young age, men are psychologically conditioned to view romantic relationships as a relentless pursuit, a game where a man must constantly prove his worth, display his resources, and compete for attention. The modern narrative dictates that a man's vitality is measured by his desire to relentlessly pursue romance. When society looks at a senior man who has stepped entirely out of this arena, it rushes to diagnose him. The cultural consensus is that he must be bitter, heartbroken, or defeated by life. They look at his solitude and call it a tragedy. But clinical psychology, behavioral science, and the lived experience of millions of senior men reveal a completely different reality. The older man who stops chasing is not a victim of loneliness. He is a master of his own reality. After decades of stress, sacrifice, heartbreak, and emotional exhaustion, many senior men undergo a profound psychological transformation. They discover that the chase is a labyrinth with no exit, designed to keep them running on an endless treadmill. And once a man steps off that treadmill and experiences true, unadulterated peace, he becomes fiercely protective of his sanctuary. Today, we are going to explore the psychological architecture of the mature masculine mind. We will dissect the truth that nobody talks about, breaking down the 7 undeniable reasons why older men have permanently stopped the chase. Let us examine the reality of the sovereign man. They realize that the chase never truly ends. In psychology, there is a concept known as the hedonic treadmill, or hedonic adaptation. It posits that humans have a tendency to constantly chase new desires, but once achieved, they quickly return to a baseline level of happiness, requiring them to chase something else to feel fulfilled. This psychological mechanism is heavily exploited in modern dating and romantic relationships. When a man is in his 20s and 30s, he operates under the illusion of a finish line. He believes that if he can just secure the right career, buy the right house, and say the exact right words, he will win the relationship. He believes that the chase concludes once the commitment is made. But the senior man has lived long enough to see behind the curtain. He knows that in many modern dynamics, the finish line is a mirage. The goalposts are constantly moving. Let us look at a practical example. A man may spend months pursuing a woman, finally winning her affection, but almost immediately the expectations shift. Now he must chase her approval. He must chase her fluctuating moods. He must constantly prove his loyalty, upgrade her lifestyle, and continuously validate her emotions to keep the relationship afloat. The older man recognizes this infinite loop. He realizes that chasing a woman who demands constant pursuit is not a romantic adventure. It is a full-time, unpaid job. He looks at the sheer amount of energy required to keep the wheel spinning, and he makes a highly rational, calculated decision. He simply stops running. He realizes that the only way to win a rigged game is to refuse to play it. They became fundamentally, deeply, emotionally exhausted. To understand the older man's retreat from the dating market, we must understand the biological toll of a lived life. The human nervous system is not designed to endure perpetual conflict. The concept of allostatic load refers to the physiological wear and tear on the body caused by chronic stress. For 50 or 60 years, a man's nervous system is battered by the demands of the world. He endures the crushing weight of economic responsibilities, the brutal politics of the workplace, the heavy burden of raising a family, and the inevitable turbulence of romantic entanglements. Think back to the relationships of your youth. Consider the immense cognitive and emotional load required to manage another human being's emotional state. Think of the hours wasted in circular arguments over trivial matters. Think of the exhausting sensation of walking on eggshells to avoid triggering an emotional outburst from a partner. When a man is young, his body possesses the hormonal resilience to recover from this emotional whiplash. He mistakes this exhausting friction for passion. But as a man crosses into his senior years, his biology dictates a new imperative equilibrium. The older man is simply too exhausted to decipher passive-aggressive behavior. He refuses to analyze mixed signals, decode cryptic text messages, or participate in manufactured drama. His emotional bandwidth is a finite resource, and his tank is running low. He recognizes that inviting a new relationship into his life introduces an unpredictable variable that could completely destabilize his hard-won peace. Therefore, choosing not to chase is a mechanism of biological self-preservation. He is protecting his literal lifespan from the lethal effects of emotional stress. They learn the profound difference between solitude and loneliness. Society deliberately conflates these two concepts to keep people trapped in the cycle of consumption and dating. We are told that to be alone is to be miserable. But psychology draws a very sharp distinction. Loneliness is a state of psychological starvation. It is the painful feeling of being disconnected. Solitude, however, is a state of psychological abundance. It is the joy of being profoundly connected to oneself. When a man is in his 20s, a Friday night spent alone often triggers anxiety. He suffers from the fear of missing out. He looks at his empty apartment and feels that he is failing at life. He uses the pursuit of women to fill the uncomfortable silence of his own mind. But as a man matures, the silence stops being terrifying. The silence becomes a canvas. Consider the practical reality of the solitary senior man. He wakes up in a home that is exactly as clean and quiet as he left it. He answers to no one. He discovers that he is actually excellent company for himself. He realizes that a romantic partner was never the missing piece to his puzzle. He was a complete picture all along. Once an older man realizes that his own solitude provides a richer, more stable, and more peaceful environment than 95% of modern relationships, the desire to chase a woman completely evaporates. He will not trade his sanctuary for a battlefield. Their standards for human connection have changed completely. Evolutionary psychology dictates that young men prioritize aesthetics, fertility cues, and physical attraction. A young man is highly visual, and he is often willing to endure a massive amount of toxic behavior, manipulation, and disrespect simply because the woman standing in front of him is beautiful. He is blinded by biology. But as a man transitions into his senior years, the biological imperative of reproduction fades, and his psychological hierarchy of values undergoes a radical inversion. The older man has developed a highly calibrated radar for behavioral patterns. Because he has lived through the entire life cycle of multiple relationships, he no longer falls in love with potential. He only deals in reality. As a practical example, a younger man might view a woman's jealousy and erratic texting as a sign of passion and how much she cares. The senior man looks at that exact same behavior and immediately identifies it as deep insecurity, a lack of emotional regulation, and a precursor to endless drama. His standards have shifted from physical excitement to psychological safety. He demands loyalty, mutual respect, and above all, peace. He knows that a beautiful woman who brings chaos into his life is a terrible investment, because his standards for character and emotional maturity are now incredibly high. The pool of acceptable partners shrinks to nearly zero. He stops chasing because he realizes almost no one meets the uncompromising standard of his peace. They no longer require external validation to feel worthy. From the moment a male child is born, society places a heavy yoke around his neck. He is taught that his inherent value is zero. He is conditioned to believe that he must become valuable by being a provider, a protector, and a performer. For decades, a man's ego is entirely tethered to how women perceive him. A compliment makes him feel like a king. A rejection makes him feel worthless. He spends his life caught in the exhausting cycle of performing for the female gaze. But as a man ages, he undergoes what the psychologist Carl Jung called individuation, the process of integrating his true self and detaching from the persona he created for society. Consider the practical reality of an older man. He has already built his life. He has survived his failures. He has proven his competence to the world and, more importantly, to himself. He has looked in the mirror for 60 years. He knows his exact flaws and he knows his exact strengths. He no longer needs a woman to tell him he is successful, capable, or masculine. His self-esteem is no longer outsourced. It has an internal locus of control. Because he has completely retired the invisible provider badge, he refuses to engage in the performative dance of modern dating. He refuses to audition for a role in someone else's life. His own approval is the only validation he will ever need. rendering the chase completely obsolete. Time feels more valuable than ever before. We must address the stark, inescapable reality of human mortality. Time is the ultimate non-renewable currency. When a man is 30, he operates under the illusion of infinite time. If he wastes 5 years in a miserable, toxic relationship, or spends 2 years chasing a woman who plays games, he writes it off as a learning experience. He believes he has an endless supply of tomorrows to start over. But when a man reaches 60, the mathematical reality of his existence comes into sharp, undeniable focus. He realizes that he is in the final chapters of his life. If he is fortunate, he has perhaps 15 or 20 healthy summers left, 15 more times to watch the snow melt, 15 more times to feel the warm July sun. With this profound realization, the value of his time skyrockets to an astronomical premium. He becomes fiercely, uncompromisingly protective of how he spends his remaining days. Think of the practical implications. In a relationship, every major decision requires a committee of two. Where to live, how to spend money, when to travel, what to eat for dinner. Everything demands compromise. But the older man has spent a lifetime compromising. He compromised for his bosses, for his children, and for his past partners. Now the debt is paid. He refuses to spend his final, most precious years negotiating his reality. He demands radical autonomy. Wasting even a single weekend arguing with a partner is a tragedy he refuses to permit. He stops chasing because he realizes that the only thing truly worth chasing now is the horizon. The ultimate conclusion: they finally decide to choose themselves. For generation after generation, men have been conditioned to be the ultimate sacrificial entities of society. A traditional man's life is defined by what he can provide, who he can protect, and how much pain he can silently endure for the benefit of others. He gives his youth to his career. He gives his prime years to his family. He gives his physical health to his obligations. He places himself dead last on his own list of priorities for 50 consecutive years. But the senior man who chooses to walk away from the chase has reached the end of that specific journey. He has fulfilled his contract, he has paid his dues in full, and in the quiet solitude of his later years, he makes the most rebellious, beautiful, and psychologically healthy decision a man can make. He says, "It is my turn." He chooses his own health. He chooses his own hobbies. He chooses his own peace of mind. He stops apologizing for wanting to be left alone. He stops trying to fit into a societal mold that never truly served his soul in the first place. The older man who stops chasing is not a tragedy. He is a triumph. He has learned the hardest lesson of the human experience, that a man cannot truly love his life until he learns to love his own company. He has faced the abyss, conquered his demons, and built an impenetrable sanctuary out of his own soul. To the younger men watching this, do not fear aging, and do not fear the cessation of the chase. View it not as a loss of vitality, but as the ultimate destination of self-mastery. And to the older men watching this, the ones who have been judged by society for choosing the quiet path, the ones who have put down the sword and refused to re-enter the arena, know this: you are not broken, you are not weird, you are simply awake. Never let anyone shame you for fiercely protecting the peace you spent a lifetime bleeding to build. If this video resonated with you, I want to hear your story. Head down to the comments and tell me, at what age did you realize that the chase was no longer worth your energy? What was the breaking point that led you to your peace? Your experiences, your scars, and your wisdom will help guide the younger men who are still fighting blindly through the storm. If this exploration of the mature masculine mind has changed the way you view your own journey toward peace, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. We are uncovering the hidden truths of a life well lived. Protect your sanctuary. The next chapter of our shared wisdom will open soon.